The message arrived while I was helping customers in my boutique. I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Ha ha ha. My hands didn't tremble as I read it. My voice didn't waver as I helped Mrs. Peterson choose a scarf. The only sign that my husband of 12 years had just destroyed our marriage with a text message was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left with her purchase wrapped in our signature silver paper before typing my reply. Good luck. My name is C. At 38, I just received the cruelest goodbye of my life, but while Mark was probably gloating over his grand exit, picturing me weeping over his betrayal, I was calmly closing my boutique for the day. The signs had been there for months. The long nights at work that never matched his paid deposits, the sudden password changes on his phone, the fact that he'd started going to the gym religiously, buying new clothes, and trying to recapture his youth. 3 months ago, I found a receipt for dinner for 2 at an expensive restaurant, the very same night he'd said he'd be working late. I opened a bank account at a different bank a week later. When he mentioned wanting to combine our accounts to simplify things, I cheerfully agreed, while transferring my personal savings to the new bank. The joint account he'd just emptied held exactly enough to keep him from getting suspicious roughly 2 months of regular deposits. The rest was tucked away safely, along with detailed records of every suspicious transaction he'd made over the past year. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother begging, Melissa. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'll send someone for my things later. Melissa, the new receptionist at his office. I'd met her at the company Christmas party. I'd watched her laugh too loud at Mark's jokes, noticed the way she touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. Young enough to be his daughter. Naive enough to think she was special. I didn't reply to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, whom I'd consulted 2 months ago when I found the hotel charges on our credit card statement. It's time, I said. He just made his move. The papers are ready, she replied. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. You want him served in Miami? No rush, I said. Let him think he's won first. Another message from Mark arrived shortly after. I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy. My little shop. The successful boutique I'd built from the ground up. The one that generated more income than his mid-level management position. The same one I'd carefully kept separate from our joint finances. I smiled, thinking of the certified letters that would greet him in Miami. I let him enjoy his moment of triumph. I spent that afternoon at our house, well, my house, since I'd inherited it from my grandmother and always kept it in my name, despite Mark's insistent suggestions to add him to the deed. Another fortunate instinct that paid off. While organizing the paperwork my lawyer would need, I found our wedding album. Mark looked so different before his midlife crisis turned him into a caricature of himself. These days he wore shirts too tight for his softening abdomen, tried too hard to connect with a world that was clearly no longer his. The 20-somethings at his office used slang that sounded ridiculous on a 45-year-old man. My phone kept buzzing with messages from him, each one more condescending than the last. I've been planning this for months. Melissa understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone else your own age. I already told my family, and they agree we've grown apart. It's no one's fault, really. I screenshotted every message and added it to my evidence folder. I let him dig his hole deeper. My lawyer would love his casual admission of premeditation, his gleeful announcement about emptying our joint account. The last message caught my eye. By the way, I used the joint card to book our flights and the hotel. Consider it my parting gift, LOL. Perfect. I immediately called the credit card company. This is Mrs. Harrison. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to Miami booked today. Hotel charges at the Royal Palm. And I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have documentation of your husband admitting to using your joint card to book a trip with his girlfriend after emptying your joint bank account? I'll be happy to forward those. The representative's professional tone couldn't hide her surprise. The satisfaction was immense as I canceled the charges. Mark and Melissa would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets invalidated and their hotel reservation canceled. My phone buzzed again. Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. I couldn't help but laugh out loud at that. He actually thought he had any claim to my grandmother's house. His ego was so inflated, he'd forgotten whose name was on the deed. Another message arrived. And I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payout for your half. My half of the business I built, I financed, I grew while he complained about my long hours and called it my hobby. I opened a bottle of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tomorrow Mark would learn some hard truths about property law and separate property. But tonight I would allow myself to enjoy the quiet and plan my next chapter. Morning brought a flurry of increasingly frantic texts. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me. I silenced my phone and headed to my boutique. Fridays were always our busiest days, and I had a new shipment of designer handbags to unpack. Life goes on, even when your husband runs off with a receptionist young enough to be his daughter. Around noon, I received an unexpected call. It was his mother, Claire. Dear Mark told us everything. He says you've been so controlling that you drove him to this. Now he's gone, but you're being vindictive and causing problems with his travel plans. I put the call on speakerphone while I arranged a window display. He mentioned emptying our joint account and charging tickets for him and his girlfriend on our credit card? Silence. Then, well, he said you left him no choice. Claire, I have his messages. Do you want me to read them to you? The one where he brags about taking our money? Or the one mocking my age? Another pause. Well, that seems a little cruel. I told you the text message breakup was inappropriate, I said. I appreciate the call, Barbara. Always liked you. But I think it's best we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Mark's family during the proceedings. Goodbye, Barbara. Later, Mark's sister Amanda was spreading family gossip through mutual friends. According to her, Mark and Melissa were stuck at a budget motel near the airport. Their Miami dreams temporarily derailed. Mark tried using his personal credit cards, but they were maxed out. Had been for months. Another red flag I'd already noted. That afternoon, my lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. He's been served yet? Not yet. But he'll be receiving the papers at his new hotel address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's social media is providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their adventure all day, including some less than flattering comments about you. I smiled, thinking of all my documentation. A year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, and text messages demonstrating premeditation. Mark had been so focused on his grand escape, he'd never considered I was watching, waiting, and preparing. My phone buzzed with another message. You think you're so smart. But I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half of that business is mine. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, adding it to the growing file of Mark's mistakes. Let him learn the hard way what separate property and business assets mean. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. The Monday emergency hearing was everything I could have anticipated. Mark showed up in his new youthful wardrobe. Designer jeans too tight for his age and a blazer that screamed midlife crisis. Melissa waited outside, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting. My lawyer methodically presented our evidence. Mark's gleeful text about emptying our account, his credit card fraud, his documented history of hidden spending. Each piece carefully collected over months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Mark's hastily hired lawyer began. My client admits to some hasty decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions have been vindictive and calculated. Calculated? My lawyer responded. Wouldn't you say prudent? My client protected her separate assets and kept detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive, that's financial intelligence. The judge reviewed my documentation. The separate property deed to the house, the boutique's records and corporation documents, all in my name. Also, the careful separation between personal and business finances, something Mark had always criticized. Mr. Harrison, the judge addressed Mark directly, you admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to finance a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Mark shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing financial fraud. The judge raised an eyebrow. And now you're claiming ownership rights to property that, according to documentation, is clearly separate from marital assets? Mark's lawyer attempted to interject. The business grew during the marriage. My client is entitled to claim a portion. My lawyer interrupted smoothly. Mrs. Harrison maintained a strict separation between business and personal finances at all times. We have documentation of every penny invested and earned. I watched Mark's face as reality began to sink in. He'd thought this would be easy. Empty our accounts, run off with his girlfriend, and maybe claim half my business in the divorce. He'd never bothered to understand why I insisted on keeping things separate, scoffed at my careful bookkeeping, calling it obsessive. The court found sufficient evidence of financial misconduct. The judge announced, all shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money was already gone. Mark protested, saying it was spent. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. The judge cut him off. And Mr. Harrison, the court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to finance adventures with paramours. Court dismissed. I heard Melissa questioning Mark about their relationship, their plans. His answer was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently on the marble floor as I returned to the business he'd never understood or respected. The next few weeks brought a series of increasingly desperate moves from Mark. He tried claiming the boutique had been his idea. He even said he remembered investing money in the early days. He went so far as to suggest he'd been my business partner all along. These claims were swiftly refuted by my meticulous records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer commented. Check his girlfriend's social media. She's now showing them living in his tiny studio apartment. Apparently, a receptionist's salary isn't exactly the glamorous escape he envisioned. Mark's family started reaching out. Their tone was markedly different from their initial accusations. We had no idea, his sister Amanda said. He told us you'd been cold and controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw the text messages. The way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother called again, this time in tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. I thought anyway. I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago. But now it felt like rats abandoning a sinking ship. The boutique thrived, ironically boosted by local gossip about my situation. Women started coming in specifically to show their support, often leaving with much more than they'd planned to buy. My ex tried something similar. One customer confided while purchasing a designer handbag. I thought he was going to take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Mark. His tone swung between rage and manipulation. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. I forwarded every message to my lawyer, unanswered. Let him dig himself deeper into his own hole. I heard Melissa was having second thoughts. Sharing his studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't afford his own place wasn't the romantic adventure she'd imagined. The age gap that had seemed exciting during secret hotel meetings now felt different under the harsh light of reality. She posted about toxic relationships and learning from yesterday's mistakes. She removed her relationship status this morning, my lawyer mentioned during an update call. I almost felt sorry for Mark. Almost. But then I remembered his laughter after telling me he'd emptied our account. The casual cruelty of his comments about my age. The way he'd assumed I'd be helpless without him. Instead of pity, I felt something else, pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. The final divorce hearing painted a very different picture than Mark had envisioned. The triumph was mine. His swagger was replaced by barely concealed panic. Melissa was notably absent. She'd moved on to a coworker her own age, according to office gossip. Mark showed up in his old clothes. The designer wardrobe apparently returned to help pay off the joint account he'd emptied. His lawyer looked tired, probably from trying to find loopholes in my documented separation of assets. Your Honor, Mark's lawyer tried one last time. Despite the documentation of separate property, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support. My lawyer interrupted. How about these text messages belittling Mrs. Harrison's business as a little shop? Or these social media posts calling it her hobby? The judge had seen through it all. The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my house, my business, and my separate property. Mark got his personal belongings and his car, which was worth less than he owed on it. You've destroyed me, he hissed as we left the courthouse. No, Mark. You destroyed yourself. I simply made sure no one else got caught in the blast radius. The man who'd mocked my age was now living in his childhood bedroom, while I continued running my successful business. You planned this all along, he accused. No. I simply paid attention. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records. His mother stepped between us. That's enough, Mark. You've embarrassed yourself enough already. As they walked away, I heard her begin to scold him. Honestly, what were you thinking? A 20-year-old? Emptying bank accounts? Sending those horrible texts? I watched them disappear. I entered the parking lot feeling relieved. Mark thought he was writing the ending of our story with that cruel text, but he'd actually just set my carefully laid plans in motion. My phone buzzed, not with text from Mark this time, but with notifications of new orders on my boutique's website. Life was moving on, but not in the direction he'd imagined. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Mark struggled to rebuild his life, the little shop he'd dismissed was thriving. I'd hired 3 new employees and launched a website that was gaining traction nationally. News of Mark's situation filtered through mutual acquaintances. He tried various dating apps, but found women his own age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women, who'd already heard his story through office gossip, rejected him outright. Apparently, Melissa had warned her friends about him, sharing screenshots of his increasingly desperate attempts to win her back after she left. It impacted his career too. His company's HR department had started an investigation into his relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand. The promotion he'd been expecting went to someone else. Someone without a history of inappropriate relationships with reception staff. He tried claiming age discrimination, Amanda told me during an unexpected visit to the boutique. He mentioned it during our family dinner. How he's being punished for dating someone younger. HR added that complaint to his file, I added smoothly. I was surprised to see his sister in my shop, but her presence spoke volumes about how far Mark had alienated his own family. I know we didn't support you at first, she admitted, running her fingers over a silk scarf. He played the victim too. But seeing how you handled everything, how he acted afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My lawyer kept me informed of Mark's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each request was denied. His claim of unfair distribution was dismissed, based on the evidence of his own actions. He actually tried arguing that his text about emptying the account had been just a joke, she told me, laughing. The judge asked him if ha made theft any less illegal. The boutique's success brought unexpected validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy entrepreneur who protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs asked me for advice on keeping personal and business finances separate. The best protection is preparation, I told one young woman who reminded me of Melissa. Always trust your instincts. Mark's mother called occasionally, usually after he'd done something particularly self-destructive. He tried online gambling, hoping for a quick fix to his financial problems. He got involved in a pyramid scheme that promised quick riches. Each attempt to recapture his previous lifestyle only sunk him deeper into trouble. I don't know where we went wrong with him, she sighed during one call. His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet, but he keeps blaming everyone else. You, Melissa, his job, the judge? I listened politely but kept my distance. Their family drama was no longer my problem. My life had moved on. filled with plans for a third boutique location and a possible expansion into luxury accessories. The only reminder of Mark's impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging in my office. His final text before I blocked his number. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Beneath it was my latest business award. Proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply thriving on your own terms. A year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third boutique location. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage, but about a successful businesswoman expanding her brand. Mark's betrayal had become a mere footnote to my success. During the Q&A, a woman asked me about keeping personal and business finances separate. My husband says I'm being paranoid. That marriage means sharing everything. My ex-husband said the same thing, I replied. Right up until he tried claiming half my business in our divorce. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. The boutique chain had grown to 5 locations, each one more successful than the last. The little shop Mark had belittled now employed 30 people, and had been featured in several national magazines. Through mutual friends, I learned Mark had finally moved out of his parents' house and into a small apartment above a garage. He'd taken a lower-paying job after his old company downsized, eliminating his position during restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though his profile picture was clearly outdated. Melissa, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original boutique. She'd finished her business degree and started her own social media consulting firm. You inspired me, she told me once, indicating the bustling shop. Showed how a woman can build something lasting instead of falling for empty promises. I kept Mark's cruel text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. Beneath it hung a new sign. Success is the best revenge. At my original boutique's 5-year anniversary celebration, I stood before my employees and loyal customers. The space had transformed from a small solo shop to the flagship store of a thriving business. Mark's mother attended, even though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She waited until the crowd thinned to approach me. I saw Mark yesterday, she said, smoothing the designer dress she'd purchased at my store. He was talking about his glory days, the life he could have had. He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose it all in the divorce. He threw it away. I thought about that text message, its casual cruelty, its assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg, to break down and prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I'd built something stronger than before. Every new boutique location was a testament to what women can achieve when they stop dimming their light for insecure men. The young saleswoman I'd hired last month, coincidentally, also named Melissa, approached with a question about the new inventory system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, I caught my reflection in the shop window. I saw what Mark hadn't been able to see 5 years ago. Not a woman aging, but a woman becoming wiser, stronger, and more successful. His cruel text message had been intended as an ending. Instead, it was a beginning. Not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved something better than someone else's midlife crisis.